They say it's a brotherhood based on rebellion.
You f***ed with one of us, you had to f*** with all of us.
But law enforcement sees a gang.
I don't look at them any different than I look at the Bloods, the Hells Angels, the Crips.
Their call letters are FSU, Friends Stand United, or...
We never wanted to be ballers. We're not pimps or pushers.
Whatever they are, they're different. They play hard and swing even harder.
There's no rules in a street fight. You know, the rules are for people that lose fights.
They claim to be just a part of the hardcore music scene.
FSU comes in, takes care of business, and gets out.
Others say they're a violent mob.
We already got enough anger to blow up the world.
FSU. They're as much a part of the hardcore scene as the raucous music. They claim to be protectors of the scene, driving out drug dealers and skinheads.
We're gonna keep the kids in our culture safe from that, you know, and smash those dudes and get them the hell out of there.
The letters FSU have many meanings, but the two most common are Friends Stand United, or some in law enforcement say FSU has thousands of members nationwide. Most hold steady jobs and don't drink or smoke. FSU's clean lifestyle attracts people like Booney, a guitarist in a hardcore band called Dead and Dying. Prior to joining FSU at 30, Booney drank too much and did drugs. He credits the gang with saving his life and says they're misunderstood.
I wouldn't consider us a gang. I'd consider us more of a crew or brotherhood.
The authorities have a different view.
It is all the trappings of a gang, and we classify them as a gang as most law enforcement organizations, or all, do, and they're a national product.
FSU doesn't lay claim to neighborhoods. Their territory is anywhere there's a hardcore music scene. Their only mission is to rage against conformity.
That is what puts us in a different step than these guys that come home from work, they crack open a beer, they watch TV, and they swallow up all the We've got bands that tell us, think better.
28-year-old Joe Hardcore is a musician and FSU member. He says kids today are being spoon-fed all the wrong values.
I don't know what we can do to society that society hasn't already done to itself. Look at the biggest companies out there, cigarette companies, beer commercials. They want you to hear, consume, buy, materialize, follow the leader.
Joe Hardcore has been in FSU for 4 years and says the gang's rage against society is justified.
Don't come at me with some, I'm a danger to society, because society's f***ed, and that's what brought us. We are the product of a f***ed up society.
FSU founder Elgin James says the gang has no problem doing what it takes to right what they see as wrong.
If someone gets in my way, gets in my friend's way, we're gonna bulldoze right over you by any means necessary.
FSU has a 20-year track record of violence, much of it directed at skinheads and drug dealers. Their MO is brutality and swarm beatings.
You gotta beat them till they're not gonna get back up again. Because what do you know what else they have? I mean, those always had guns. Those always had some crazy ass accumulated weapons of bats with nails in it. You never know what they had.
FSU says their brutality is justified.
If you're fearing us, it's because you really put yourself in a bad position that you shouldn't have.
Troy, New York, a suburb of Albany. It's a working class town with a population of about 47,000. Troy's downtown reveals a rough edge with an unemployment rate higher than the national average. The surrounding area is home to some of the largest colleges in New York State, including Cornell, RPI, and Siena, making it a city of haves and have-nots. There are long-standing feuds between townies and the college kids who reappear every fall. Bruce St. Gelais, the leader of Troy's FSU chapter, has been in his share of scuffles. He was in and out of juvenile hall as a kid, on charges ranging from burglary to assault.
I'm definitely outcasted from society because of mistakes that I made as a child.
At the age of 23, Bruce joined FSU, the only society he felt would accept him.
Why wouldn't we gravitate towards each other when we all have the same basically oppression that we bear on our shoulders on a day-to-day basis for whatever reasons?
31-year-old FSU member Lolo joined the Troy crew for a different reason: boredom.
There is not a lot to do. If you're not of age, you can't drink, there is nothing to do.
Growing up, the music scene was an outlet. Lolo started attending shows at age 16.
Definitely a big hardcore scene. It gets a lot of your younger kids and your middle-aged kids and everything else out. They're not out there doing drugs, they're not out there robbing, they're not stealing.
What they are doing is getting into fistfights. Third Street, downtown Troy. It was Saturday, February 26th, 2005, 11 p.m. The Hudson Duster, a raging hardcore hangout, was brimming with testosterone. The mosh pit was in full swing.
It almost looks like you're fighting. Flapping the arms, kicking, everything else. People accidentally get hit. It is what it is.
The band called 25 to Life took the stage. Their fans knew their lyrics. The club was cramped, with no room for the timid.
If you stood on the wrong side of the bar, you would get slammed. You would get hit up.
The bouncer, Lyle Bliss, also an FSU member, stood by in case there were problems. It didn't take long. 29-year-old Brian Carlo was walking out of the bathroom when he got too close to the action.
He got caught with a punch, a kick, or whatever else, split his lip. He turned around and got pissed about it.
According to FSU members, Brian spit blood and immediately started throwing punches. His first blow hit the girlfriend of an FSU member.
And he punched her dead in her face and then spit in her face and then started punching dudes that were just standing there.
FSU saw what was going down and surrounded Brian, who was suddenly in a brawl and badly outnumbered.
That girl's boyfriend and friends started jumping on him.
Friends don't let friends fight alone. That's their moniker.
Within seconds, Brian was swarmed.
Somebody's gonna be a to us and start being a smart. We'll defuse that problem.
You ever see a cartoon where you see like a big circle of people as it goes down? That's basically what it looked like. You couldn't tell who was who.
Brian's brother, Matthew Carlo, tried to reach Brian to protect him.
Now he's swinging at whoever to get to his brother.
The more the brothers fought, the more FSU members jumped in.
It was just everybody, you know, fisting.
The punches flew, while Bliss and the other bouncers hustled Brian Carlo out the door. The crowd outside numbered more than 100.
So now the fight's continuing outside with Brian. And his brother is still sitting there trying to get to him.
Matthew Carlo was angry and exchanged words with Bliss. It quickly escalated, and the fight reignited. Once again, the other FSU members joined in, using their fists and feet to pummel Matthew.
When he was down and helpless, there was severe blows delivered to Carlo, to his head, elbow strikes to the head, kicks, punches.
The bouncer, Bliss, gave one last kick to Matthew Carlo's already bloody head. By then, he lay unconscious on the ground.
His brother, Brian, picked him up, threw him up on his shoulder, and carried him around the corner. That was that.
It wasn't the first time FSU members had beaten someone to a bloody pulp, and it wouldn't be the last.
If someone's gonna try to come at you at a level 5, you come at them at a level 10, and then it's done, you know? I'm not gonna be the one that's gonna lose my life.
FSU is a gang hidden in the midst of the hardcore music scene. Their style, in your face.
As long as you're not the Partridge Family, you might as well be a gang.
For years, they flew under the radar. Then, in 2004, Boston authorities got wind of a violent video being peddled on the internet. Boston Beatdown was a compilation of swarm beatings and pit beefs. FSU's violence could be seen by anyone with an internet connection and an interest in street fighting. It's a movement that started with Elgin James, one of FSU's founding members. A mixed-race child, he was adopted at age 5 in 1974 by a middle-class family from Bridgeport, Connecticut. James says his father beat him, although his mother tried to intervene. The experience taught Elgin to express his feelings through violence. By age 12, he found an outlet to channel some of his rage, punk rock.
For the first time, he realized, like, oh, okay, like, I'm not the only up in the world.
In 1982, 13-year-old James found his calling, a substance-free lifestyle known as straight edge. Proponents of straight edge called for a drugless music scene. James was on board.
I don't drink or do drugs because I don't believe in that weakness. I don't believe in the whole ethics of, you know, I had a hard work week. You know, I really deserve this drink. I really deserve this drugs.
To James, violence was the opposite of weakness. That same year, his aggressive behavior got him arrested.
I was in juvenile hall for a while when I was 13 for hitting someone in the face with a rock and smashing out their windshield with a baseball bat.
James was released from Long Lane Juvenile Detention Center when he was 15. In 1986, he began attending Antioch College in Ohio. He planned to become a civil rights lawyer. That year, he returned to Bridgeport for Christmas break, only to find his past waiting for him. He was walking down a dark street when he was viciously beaten with a baseball bat.
What I do remember is just footsteps behind me, swing of a bat. I woke up in a hospital bed, you know, 3 days later, unconscious, the tube down my throat.
James had suffered brain damage. He spent a month in the hospital and several more in physical and occupational therapy. His dream of becoming a lawyer was over.
I couldn't read at that time because because from the brain damage I could barely speak. I still stutter at times.
James was unable to return to college. He decided to leave Bridgeport with some friends and ended up on the streets.
So we ended up, you know, living in abandoned buildings and in squats, first across the country in the Midwest, and then we, you know, ended up residing in Boston.
Boston, 1989. On Lansdowne Street, just around the corner from the iconic Fenway Park, trouble was always stirring.
On a Saturday night, the city's littered with fistfights. Boston is really the last safe bastion of a good fistfight.
James was right at home.
When you're a homeless kid and you're on the streets, you're gonna make sure that no one's gonna get over on you.
One night, James and his friends were hungry and decided to steal some cash. Their targets, 3 drug dealers who sold on a corner in the Mission Hills section of Boston.
Just rolled up, smashed one in the face with a sawed-off baseball bat, while the other 2 just ran and took the money out of his pockets.
The robbery took just seconds and netted them a few $100s and an overwhelming sense that the dealers got what they deserved. James and the crew became expert thieves with no remorse.
People at times have called us vigilantes. We weren't victimizing innocent people. We weren't robbing from the old lady on the street. We were robbing from the guy who was selling drugs, to the old lady's son on the street. That's what we were doing.
In addition to being homeless and ruthless, this crew had something else in common. An affinity for the driving style of music called hardcore.
A bunch of throwaway kids found each other in this culture, in hardcore.
James and his crew became fixtures on the city's underground music scene.
They initially started out as friends who were going to hardcore shows together, and it just kind of morphed into a gang.
They related to the angry music, but there was a problem. The Boston hardcore scene was infested with neo-Nazi skinheads, a racist organization that had a reputation for brutally beating hardcore fans who weren't white or didn't conform to their beliefs.
And you weren't safe because you had these dudes terrorizing everyone and beating the shit out of everyone.
One night in 1991, James and his crew stumbled upon a bloody brawl between some neo-Nazi skinheads and a group of kids from South Boston. They joined the Southies in the fight. The skinheads outnumbered them 5-1, but James and crew dominated. It was an inspirational moment for James, who decided the group needed to get organized.
It really was just, we're gonna up and like, hey, that's a great name.
FSU was born. The gang slowly reclaimed the hardcore scene from the skinheads. James recalls beating one neo-Nazi leader to a pulp.
I was joking with him while he was bleeding, saying, come on, man, I'm half a n***. Come on, use your white power, get me off of you.
On the streets and in the clubs, FSU gained a reputation as tough enough to take on the neo-Nazis. Their membership began to increase. Still, by 1995, FSU had less than 24 members in Boston. What they lacked in numbers, they made up for in brutality. The gang began to employ their trademark swarm attacks on their enemies, doling out beatings with no regard for a fair fight. Soon enough, the skinheads weren't their only targets. In the 90s, drug use at Boston clubs was rampant. James and company were straight edge, drug and alcohol free. For some, it became an FSU way of life.
Straight edge means you don't drink and you don't do drugs. Some guys in FSU happen to be straight edge.
Some militant straight edgers were happy to impose their views on anyone they came across.
If someone else was drinking in front of them or someone else was doing drugs in front of them, they would attack and assault them.
Guys got together and said, we're sick of these coming in here and selling their drugs on our scene.
In the late 1990s, FSU became de facto enforcers on the hardcore scene in Boston. If someone peddled drugs or pushed a racist agenda, it was an actionable offense, punishable by a beatdown.
I'll never forget the sound of somebody leaned up against the wall of a club and hearing blood just flow like water. It was like somebody turned on a spigot and it was flowing that fast.
James and his crew were taking their own share of the hits.
The doctor's kit. Nice.
James played doctor to himself and his friends, using dental floss and sewing needles to mend wounds.
I'd be the one sewing them up. First surgery I'd ever done, stitching my stomach up with dental floss.
Soon, Boston police caught wind of what was going down. They didn't buy FSU's Avenger Act for 1 minute.
We've been contacted by several nightclub owners saying, look, these kids are showing up, they're hurting my business, they're intimidating my other patrons.
By the turn of the millennium, FSU was on the cops' radar. Though the gang's call letters were coming to be known for something different, Friends Stand United, cops didn't view them as less of a menace.
Wonder why we call ourselves Friends Stand United. It's for a reason, because we don't disperse and we watch each other. Other friendships aren't like that.
FSU considered itself a family. Outside Boston, members could always find a place to crash with the like-minded.
It's a very transient organization. We're following the bands.
The crew soon had posses in Chicago, Ohio, and upstate New York, including Troy. Hardcore fans welcomed the brotherhood.
No matter what time of day or night, you can call on them, and you got someone there for you. We're all equal. We're all the same.
There was another place ripe for an FSU chapter, the city of brotherly love. Like Boston, Philly had a hardcore scene that was plagued by the skinheads.
In Pennsylvania, you had the Eastern Hammerskins. In New Jersey, you had Atlantic City Skinheads. Some serious guys that had to be fought.
Joe Hardcore and his friends had been fighting the skinheads for years. By 2000, Joe was looking into the possibility of a future marriage with the Boston FSU.
We met some Boston bands like, you guys are just like us. And we were kind of like, you know, when you had that kindred spirit.
Kids that are living in similar circumstances, had similar problems. The Philadelphia kids have been beating up Nazis for years, have been fighting really hard.
It would take several more years before FSU became official in Philly. In the meantime, Joe and his crew got plenty of practice, taking on anyone and everyone who got in his way.
We'd be standing out front in a line going, I don't think we're gonna get out of this. Or looking for bottles on the streets or parking lots, hoping that if there's a fight that goes outside, we can smash them with something.
In the spring of 2004, Joe and Elgin James met for the first time on Lansdowne Street.
When I met Joe Hardcore and I met the Philly kids, it was looking in the mirror.
Together, they plotted their next step. Their plan was to strengthen FSU everywhere and dominate the hardcore scene. Not all of Joe Hardcore's Philly brothers agreed with his judgment.
A lot of the guys didn't believe me. They're like, are you serious? This is what we're really gonna, you know, start flying this flag? And I'm like, we do it now. We're gonna raise a f***ing army. We're gonna level the playing field and go, we're on f***ing top.
In America's hardcore music scene, FSU, or Friends Stand United, was clicking up across the U.S.
Went from Philadelphia and New Jersey together, out to Chicago. Next thing you know, we're in California, Seattle, and it really just spread.
In towns all across the country, FSU was enforcing its laws. Boston, December 5th, 2004. While leaving a hardcore show, a patron mouthed off to an FSU bouncer. Moments later, an FSU member named Poncho and 4 other members swarmed the patron. Poncho wielded a deadly weapon.
He takes his shoe off and repeatedly beats the subject when he's on the ground while the other people putting the boots to him kicking him.
The patron barely survived the 5-on-1 beating.
He'd stopped breathing at one point. He required 11 staples in the back of his head to close one wound and 14 stitches above one eye.
All over the nation, thousands of new recruits were showing their willingness to live by FSU's credo.
We're talking about 10 or more years of being the smaller guys, using numbers. We made it an entire national thing, which was, you know, that was the precept to begin with. We really took control of what we wanted that way.
Between 2004 and 2007, FSU was linked to 3 killings across the country. In Tucson, an FSU member was shot after he attacked a man with a hammer at a hardcore club. In New Jersey, a young man was beaten to death by alleged FSU members while defending his friend who wore a t-shirt displaying the Confederate flag to a hardcore venue. The authorities suspected many other crimes were unreported. They labeled FSU as a gang. It's a claim FSU members dispute.
It's easier to pin something on a group of people that are considered a gang.
FSU's membership continued to expand.
It's FSU's world, whereas you join us, I'm not gonna let you f up. I'm not out there snatching purses. I'm not out there trying to f up their kids' heads with drugs. I'm not trying to pimp out their daughters. We're building brothers.
FSU members wear their letters proudly. It's a brotherhood based on the ability to use your fists, not identifiable codes and rituals. Their first commandment is violence.
If you're gonna swing to f us, expect me to swing right back and f you right back.
The message is, they're gonna beat you, so you know you've been beat.
The next rule is their commitment to one another.
The gang replaces the family, you know? It gives you brotherhood, it gives you love, it gives you respect, it gives you fear on the street.
A potential FSU member must do 2 things to become part of the gang. Be a rabid fan of hardcore music and swear an unfading allegiance to the brotherhood. Those who want to join that brotherhood are called probates. The probates are mentored by experienced FSU members, but they must pay their dues. The right to wear FSU letters can take months, even longer.
You could probate for a year and not make it. It's as long as it takes. If we haven't made our decision yet, we haven't made our decision yet. That means you're f***ed up.
According to the gang principles, screwing up can mean being disloyal, insubordinate, or turning your back on a brother. FSU has an unwritten code. It says that members must be prepared at all times to fight on behalf of the brotherhood.
We had this code, and we're gonna follow it no matter what. You're fighting more for your life, you're fighting for your best friends, you're fighting for your brothers.
For FSU, it's all about power by numbers.
Nobody needs to jump in. All those guys are able to take care of the situation by themselves. It's a statement of loyalty. It's friends standing united. That's what it is.
Not all fights favor FSU. Joe Hardcore's face is living proof that brawling comes at a cost.
Look at my face. My nose is not straight. I have a wired jaw, steel plate in my jaw. This does not come from fighting 20-on-1 fights.
In a fight, any weapon works.
I beat someone up with a dustbuster once. My friend used to have a human thigh bone that he'd use, you know, to a padlock on a bandana, to the old, 50s pool ball in the sock, to, whatever you want to use.
Prospects are expected to prove themselves in fights before they can claim FSU.
I'm not just going to give you your letters. That's not how we do it.
For letters to be gained, it's a matter of whatever that chapter's principle is, whatever their going rate is.
Once a probate is finally accepted in the gang, they get the gear and the look. The gang has no colors, but the FSU letters can be seen everywhere. There are also slogans that advertise their beliefs, as well as commonly used symbols.
Some of the FSU symbols that you might see are, you know, baseball bats or knives or brass knuckles.
Instead of tagging territory on the streets, loyalists marked themselves with FSU-inspired ink. Where they put these tats shows their pride.
They'll put them right on their neck, put them right on their hands, put them on the back of their arms, places that are going to be readily exposed to a vast majority of the community.
Sometimes the ink makes it hard to hide from the law.
So when you brand yourself or give yourself a name, you're basically considered a gang. Just for that fact alone.
Why would you put that on your arm if you were not a member of FSU?
Some ink speaks to FSU's history, like their battle with the neo-Nazis for control of Boston's hardcore venues. Two crossed hammers, once worn by skinheads, is now a standard FSU tattoo.
We took that back. Our FSU members got them because we were the ones, you know, beating up and getting rid of those hammer skins.
Other tats are code for their call letters.
You'll see them with a 378 tattoo, which is FSU, on a foam pad.
FSU's hierarchy is simple. Each chapter manages its own affairs, much like a state. Chapters have a single leader, a go-to guy they call an advisor. It's not an elected position. It's given to the guy who is the toughest and most charismatic. When crimes involve swarms of FSU members, like the 2005 beating of Matthew Carlo, it can be hard for authorities to pin down one suspect.
That was not what I would consider a fair fight.
He was probably getting kicked and punched by 6, 7 people.
Troy, New York, February 26th, 2005. At the Hudson Duster, a local hardcore music venue, FSU members viciously beat 36-year-old Matthew Carlo.
He was bleeding, bruised up, lumped up. I mean, everything happened so quick.
The incident didn't surprise local authorities. They were familiar with FSU's track record.
You bump into one of these members the wrong way, they'll assault you. They will not stop until you're in the hospital.
When police arrived at the bloody scene, Matthew Carlo was on his way to the hospital. Meanwhile, FSU was busy concealing the evidence. The girlfriends of members helped by hiding FSU hats in their purses and stuffing knives down their pants. Dozens of witnesses to the fight who weren't in FSU wouldn't talk.
We had resistance from people that were at the scene. We had a lot of trouble gathering evidence.
Just moments after he arrived at the hospital, doctors pronounced Matthew Carlo dead. His head was bashed in, and he had visible bruises all over his body from being kicked and punched. One of the first to give police his statement was Lyle Bliss, the club's bouncer and an FSU member. He claimed that he punched Matthew Carlo only once in the face. Then he quickly changed his story, admitting to not only kicking Carlo, but volunteering that he'd struck first. The investigators were not convinced that the bouncer was solely to blame. They went after other FSU members, including Lolo, who was in the thick of the mob.
Trying to break it up puts me in the middle of it.
The investigating officer questioned Lolo's involvement in the beating.
His exact words to me is, well, we can't prove your intent of trying to hurt him, and you can't prove your intent that you're really trying to break it up.
Troy's local leader, Bruce St. Gelais, was also questioned. He claimed he was with his family the night of Carlo's death.
I was actually going to go to that show that night, but I didn't.
Months after the beating, Lolo admitted swinging at Carlo with an open hand, then hitting him in the chest and causing him to fall. On October 12, 2005, the cops arrested Lolo.
I was all over the news, all over the papers. I was looked at different. People were giving me dirty looks. They didn't want to be near me. Basically ruined my reputation.
Over the course of 2 days, police arrested 5 more FSU members, including their leader, Bruce.
8 U.S. Marshals and Troy police ended up apprehending me at my house. They come into my house, guns drawn.
Despite Bruce's alibi, one witness placed him at the scene.
And it only takes for one person to say that they were, even if it's 10 say they weren't, and they can still pick you up.
The prosecutors charged Bruce, Lolo, and 4 other FSU members with second-degree gang assault. Lolo pled guilty to attempted misdemeanor assault and received 1 year of probation.
Oh, I was innocent. Absolutely innocent.
In December 2005, Lyle Bliss pled guilty to criminally negligent homicide and second-degree assault. He was sentenced to 5 years in New York State's Livingston Correctional Facility. The district attorney later dropped the charges against Bruce and 3 of the other FSU defendants. The death of Matthew Carlo changed the way Troy viewed FSU. But it didn't weaken the vision of founder Elgin James and FSU leader Joe Hardcore.
We're trying to build up this culture. We're trying to build up, protect our own, subcultures.
The 2 leaders were working on plans to make FSU even bigger and stronger.
Picture in every city the guy that you don't want to with at a show. They have different names, they got different faces. One day they're all wearing a hat like this.
They focused on getting FSU bouncers hired at hardcore venues. They also confronted music promoters that they believed were exploiting the bands.
All these other bands would get screwed by these promoters, and we're like, you know what, time to take it back. We took shows that were in the hands of promoters that looked at bands as commodities.
Some law enforcement communities began to investigate whether FSU was using forcible threats to control which bands got booked and how much they got paid. Some bar owners whispered the allegations to police.
They said they were being intimidated by FSU. Basically, one of them would go to the club manager and say, look, you give us a certain amount of money and we won't cause problems in your bar. No one would come forward and testify against them.
James denies the claims and says they would never make it more difficult for hardcore musicians to earn their livings.
How would a guitarist in one band then extort money from another band when we know how hard it is to, survive on tour? So that's completely wrong. So if you're gonna say we're doing something bad, just try to work a little harder and get what we're doing bad right.
FSU continued to grow. By 2006, it had a new problem. Posers. People who wanted to be FSU, but didn't want to live by their rules.
We have FSU popping up everywhere. It's gonna be watered down, it's kind of out of our control.
The gang treated copycats harshly.
If they had an FSU tattoo and they were not the same as us, well then that tattoo would be gone by the time we left.
Just as the violent vision of James and Joe Hardcore had begun to be achieved, it came to a grinding halt. In 2006, Elgin James' adoptive mother became critically ill. As she lay on her deathbed, she asked her son to consider where his life was headed.
It's still not too late for a second chance. You can still go on. You've been living the same adventure for so long now, what else is there?
James made a radical decision.
I've done this. I'm getting out of Boston. I'm done.
Troy, New York. Despite the 2005 killing of Matthew Carlo, many FSU members here remain loyal to the gang and all that it stands for. Troy's leader, Bruce, is married with 3 children. He has no plans to leave the gang.
I've been proud of being an FSU member for over a decade now. The day that I started made me a better person.
In spite of FSU's history of violence, he still insists FSU is not a gang.
We're not a criminal organization. We don't advocate any criminal activity. We advocate brotherhood, friendship, loyalty to each other.
For his role in the beating death of Matthew Carlo, Lolo served 1 year of probation. He blames the cops not FSU, for his conviction.
And FSU didn't get me in that trouble. Troy cops got me in that trouble.
In Boston, the birthplace of FSU, the law has stepped up its efforts against the gang. The release of DVDs like the Boston Beatdown has allowed cops to better target members. Boston police now say FSU-related offenses have declined dramatically.
Like I said, we haven't seen them heavily in the city in at least 2 years. As far as Boston goes, I think we got them under control here.
The streets of Philadelphia have changed a lot since Joe Hardcore was a teenager, first hitting the hardcore circuit.
We're talking about 300 people are inside running out, breaking these windows, going nuts, and we're all running for all God only knows where when the cops came. That's the way it used to be. The thing that there'd be a Starbucks on one corner is just nuts.
The streets may have changed, but the authorities' pursuit of FSU has stayed the same. Police around the country continue to learn more about FSU's inner workings. That makes Joe Hardcore nervous.
I'm always afraid of law enforcement because they have a job to do. Their job is to put words into people's mouths. Their job is to build up these insane hierarchical structures and come up with these half-assed ideas where schemes are built.
Some in law enforcement suspect FSU is now selling drugs, in direct opposition to the straight-edge philosophy of many of its founding members.
There was a lot of allegations that were thrown out there. They were involved in dealing meth, steroids. We had a couple bar managers we had talked to who just absolutely refused to testify.
Joe Hardcore denies the allegations.
We talk about lower-end drug dealing. We talk about the stuff that you'd think would be a part of our culture. It's not. That's the difference here is gang cultures is based upon getting these millions of ants to be worker ants, to build up the stake of the crew, whereas we're building brothers.
Boston police are also exploring links between FSU and the infamous outlaw motorcycle gang. They claim FSU members from New England to Los Angeles have become outlaws in training.
For a while, they were acting as the farm team. I mean, you'd get kids that would graduate from FSU and become outlaws.
Almost 2 decades after FSU founder Elgin James made his mark on the streets of Boston, he reminisces about his fighting days.
Yeah, I mean, I've been stabbed many times, you know, and I've been shot at, and I've had a gun held to my head a few times. And yeah, of course, you know, but it becomes a thing, it's just ridiculous. I mean, basically my death is not that big of a deal. My death is no different than a squirrel getting run over hit by a car. You know, none of our deaths are. You know, like it may seem really important to me, you know, but it's really not important to the universe or important to the world.
A lot has happened to James since then. He says he left FSU in 2006. James is now married and has moved to LA, where he's pursuing a second career in the film business. He sees some parallels between his life now and his days with FSU.
So I'm used to like, okay, there's some sort of problem here, you know, I'm gonna punch you in the face. But these people, they'll smile at you and then, you know, you're gonna be trying to reach back to take the knife out of your back.
James still holds powerful sway over FSU. After 20 years, he remains a legend in the hardcore scene.
Mr. James could go anywhere in the United States at any FSU event or any concert event, he would automatically gain respect. They would just give him that respect.
Those who remain FSU say they'll continue to change the music scene by any means necessary.
Is there an honor to be FSU? Absolutely. Family forever.
How hard is it to believe that a bunch of angry guys got together and through the up idea of brotherhood, we've made a change in our own world?
Whether that change is for good remains to be seen.
We never considered ourselves as outlaws. We never considered ourselves as criminals. I'm not gonna hold your hand or babysit you through it. I'm gonna hit you in the face with a brick, and then you'll learn your lesson.